Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, because we have an incredible guest. And then also, this is the first episode of season 2 on the Power and Purpose podcast. And I'm just so excited. And during the break, I took a month off from recording episodes and posting episodes and all the things. And it was so nice to just integrate the work. And I got so much out of going back to my own conversations with guests and listening to them, even listening to some of my insights and some of the guest insights. So I invite you to check out also some of the episodes in season 1. There were so many, 78 powerful episodes. So go back and look at some during the holiday break if you can. And then also thank you for joining us for season 2. There's already so many powerful conversations already lined up and scheduled. So thanks for being here. Now for today, we have Lana Manikowski. Correct me, did I say that right?
It's Manikowski.
Manikowski here with us. Super excited for this conversation. Lana is helping successful infertile women thrive and feel fulfilled without children. So today's conversation is going to be so insightful. I've listened to her podcast and I was just taken back by so many of the insights, so many of the powerful themes and concepts that we actually need to redefine for ourselves as women. We need to take our power back and really, if it resonates with you, decondition from societal expectations and really redefine your own life. So that's why I'm super excited to have Lana here. Lana, thank you so much for being here.
So glad to be here, Vanessa. I felt like when you and I connected, I just knew that energetically we had some good vibe going on about the things that we believe in and what we want to continue to spread out in the world. So thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So first I want to start off, you've had a 7-year journey before you are here today.
Yeah.
So what did that 7-year journey consist of? What did that look like?
Yeah, well, that journey was my path to motherhood. And it's something that I think I always thought would happen when I was ready for it to happen. But being someone who was very goal driven, very successful, I got really involved in a career that took me, traveling many places and focusing on everything except, finding out if I could become a mom. I just assumed when the time would come, which for me, I got married at 35. And so at age 37, my husband and I finally went to the doctor to figure out why we hadn't gotten pregnant yet. And that's when I was diagnosed with something called unexplained infertility. And so from that point on, it was a 7-year journey off and on, just going to different fertility clinics, trying holistic, natural methods to get pregnant. And after, all of that kind of came to a close, we decided that since we couldn't become biological parents, we were going to stop our journey there. And I really felt so like I was the only one in the room who couldn't get pregnant. And so, yeah, that was my 7-year journey through fertility treatments.
Wow. What was the most challenging? You gave us a beautiful summary. What was the most challenging thing during that time?
I think as somebody who was used to being very goal oriented and having a plan and being able to figure out how to achieve the plan, it was probably really, it was made me question whether I was really a successful person anymore if I couldn't figure out how to do this thing that so many women do easily and naturally and without even trying sometimes. So I think for me, it really got me to question, am I really as successful and powerful as I think, as I, thought I was for all these years in my life? So that was probably the most challenging.
So in a way, self-doubt.
A lot of self-doubt, a lot of, I would say even shame probably mixed in there because I felt embarrassed to tell people that I was not able to get pregnant. And then people would offer you oh, I'm so sorry. Or they'd say oh, keep trying, keep praying, keep doing this. And then you felt like, oh, they don't realize how hard I really am trying. It made you really feel invisible, I think, in many ways. That something that, like I said, seems so easy, and something that just came naturally to so many women, or so many women avoid trying to get pregnant, for so many years in your younger years, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait, I'm ready now. So yeah.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, right? The doubt and shame. And I think so many of us, I mean, side note, but my personal opinion is, you know, it's a part of life. We all, I mean, shame and doubt comes in different packages for so many of us, and it's something to navigate. And do you feel like were do you feel like now you've navigated beyond that, like you've grown your perspective, your acceptance for yourself and your life and all the things you've gotten beyond most of those doubts and shameful thoughts?
I have. And the reason that I decided to do the work that I do is because there was no one there to show me the way. And when my last conversation, my last meeting with my doctor to tell me that my journey through treatments was finished, there was no offering of a therapist, there was no offering of any type of support system. And I really don't want women to have to do that alone. And I fortunately was able to piece my life back together. It wasn't like a 6-month thing. It took several years to get to this point. And I feel so comfortable being someone who is childless and no longer feeling as though I'm an anomaly, or that I can't connect with people who have kids, or my friends with kids aren't part of my crew anymore. Like, there was like this whole isolation period where if anyone had kids, I just couldn't have them around me because I just felt like there was no way our lives could intermingle. And I realized how much more isolating that was for me. And so now to be on this side of thing and to be able to connect with people, regardless of whether they have kids or not, my life seems so much more full because of the work that I've done and the type of work that I teach in my community with the women that I coach.
Hmm, that is so powerful, so powerful. And yeah, tell us a little bit more about the work that you do with women.
Well, a lot of women come to me kind of similar. They haven't been given any resources. They might have a therapist, but the therapist has 3 kids at home. They don't feel like they can really relate or necessarily connect on the level that they're looking for. So I have a podcast. A lot of women will find me from my podcast, just I think doing Google searches, which it's sad that, in this day and age, almost 2025, that there's not a greater referral pattern or treatment pattern for women to navigate life after infertility doesn't give you children. And a lot of the work that I do is helping women see that they can recreate a story for themselves and see themselves in a different way, that they still feel proud of who they are. They still feel connected to themselves and their partner, the people around them, and figuring out like really that your story can unfold in a different way and it can still feel really good and you can feel proud of who you are. So that's the work that I do. A lot of the women that I work with are also looking for community. They haven't met anyone else who wanted to be a mom and couldn't. And if they have, it's, some like sad story that they don't want to associate themselves with, right? Because we've had this societal like comparison of like the old spinster who like dies old alone in a nursing home because she has no kids to take care of her. So figuring out how do we like separate ourselves and realize like that's not the version of the story that I want for me. And I help women in my community find other women who want to grow beyond their childlessness and really give them this license or this like opportunity to see like you can choose whatever it is you want to believe about yourself. And it doesn't have to be falling in line with this old outdated version of what life looks like without kids.
I love that because, we're heavily programmed, especially my generation and your generation when we're younger. I don't know if the young generations are getting as programmed as we were. I'm not sure. maybe not. I can't speak on it, but you know, everything from the Disney shows we were watching to, you know, playing house. Like I remember like playing house was actually an instruction in my kindergarten class, you know, and like your dolls were like your babies. And then like the boy in the class was like the person bringing home the groceries. Like it was just so, you know, societal. Like that was a literal exercise in my kindergarten class that stuck with me. And for me to remember that so vividly, it's so interesting. But, so yeah, the societal thing, and I think that's where a lot of um the confusion can come in the beginning, you know, when we're really accepting our journeys and being empowered in our lives. It's the societal expectations, the pressures, the stress, you know, and even from our families, you know, people really wanting us to have kids, and you know we're on our own journey, so responding to that in so many different ways or in the best way possible is probably a task. I didn't look at your freebie thoroughly, but I looked at the title, and maybe you can give us some of these. I think it's called What to Say. Is it
Yes,
what
the top 27 things people say when you're childless. It's kind of a long title, but it's sort of kitschy, I guess, in a way. So yeah, I would find that as, you know, somebody who was very career oriented and social, I'd go to these networking events, or I'd go to a work event, and you know, always meeting new people. And the first thing people seem to ask her is like, how many kids do you have? And when you don't have kids, it could be a very off-putting thing, because you might not have the words to explain it. Or, you know, someone will be like, oh, you'll say, oh, I don't have kids, and be like, oh, you're so lucky, or you can have mine, or pray and, you know, it'll happen. And I think that for the women that I work with, at least, who know that they're not going to be moms, it could make them feel as though they're diminished, like they don't have enough relevance if they don't have that instant connection that you can form a conversation off of, you know, whether you have kids or not. So I created this resource to create some awareness around, you know, what are some of the common things, these top 27 things people say, but also like, how can you respond to that? And
right?
people, you know, depending on where you are in your path, like you might not be ready to talk to somebody about the fact that you have infertility. You might not be able to, you know, find the right words. So I offer opportunities for people to tap into this document and maybe start practicing, like, what would be a response? Because that way you're not like a deer in headlights when you go to this event and somebody, you feel like you're cornered with this question. You could be like, oh, you know, just a simple no, I don't have kids.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah.
it's like, it seems so like mind blowing that you can actually tell someone no and not give them an explanation.
Without trying to justify it. Exactly. That I saw that and I was like, oh my God, that's so powerful. Do you have any of those responses that you can kind of give us, for example?
Yeah, well, for me, I think it depends on where, you know, your audience, but for me, I always try to offer an opportunity to educate others about infertility, or that IVF. You know, I went through multiple rounds of IVF, what it is, because, you know, I realize some people just may not ever know someone who's had to go through that in their societal, you know, surroundings, or in their cultural surroundings. Like maybe infertility wasn't anything that they ever knew was a problem. So I'll oftentimes be like, oh, you know, my husband and I, we tried really hard. I went through something called IVF. And, you know, we decided that if we weren't going to have a biological child, that we were going to stop our journey there. And then sometimes they'll be like, people will ask more. So I feel like for me at this point, where I'm much more open and able to talk about my journey, I can educate people along the way, and maybe allow the next woman in line who, you know, might be going through something like that, isn't going to be cornered with the same kind of question, because I've created this awareness now for this person who might know better than to just assume that everybody has kids.
Yeah, yeah. What a powerful tool to empower us, you know, just to stand in our power, because half the battle is, you know, knowing what to say in a responsible, kind way, you know, because most of us don't want to like create tension, but sometimes someone's already kind of made a lot of assumptions, or, you know, it might be headed that way. So to kind of just kind of make the conversation more neutral, and then still feel empowered and still have a conversation and still offer some mutual understanding. Yeah, I think that's just a really powerful tool. Are there any other responses on that document that you can give us as an example?
Yeah, well, I think another one is, just telling someone, oh, it's kind of a complicated conversation. I'm just not up for having right now.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really nice one. If you're still kind of figuring things out, and it's a way to set maybe a little bit of a boundary. Like, I think it's straightforward enough, but it is respectful of the fact that, you're telling someone, it's sort of it's a sensitive topic for me right now. So we'd hope that someone would interpret that as like, okay, we can stop the questions now. So for me, I think that's a really good, when you're in this transitional phase right now where you're still kind of getting your arms around things and what feels right to you. But I really encourage, if someone feels called to look at the document and download it, if they're in this situation, is to practice the different answers. Like, I would literally know that I'd be going to a networking thing, and I would stand in front of the mirror and I'd imagine someone asking me, and then I would practice my response, and I would practice my facial expressions, because it's amazing how such an innocently seeming question can feel so gut-wrenching and invasive. So I would just practice and get used to what it would feel like. And then when the question came, I felt like a little bit more prepared with my answer. So that's why I give kind of a variety of responses in the document, because I realize people are at different places in their journey as far as like a comfort level and who their audience is, if you're amongst family, because that's the other thing. We've got Thanksgiving coming up here in the US, and a lot of people are going to be seeing family that they might see only a couple times a year. You've got Aunt Sally, who's always up in your business, and she wants to know, like, any babies yet? So how do you answer that, knowing that it's family? And even though it's family, they don't necessarily have to be tapped into everything that you've been going through. But how can you answer Aunt Sally and just be like, oh, it's been a really rough year, Aunt Sally, we're working on it. Or, it's a long story, maybe we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah, yeah. Having boundaries, it seems so obvious, but it's not, and because when we're put in those situations on the spot, uh, and it's uncomfortable, maybe if someone's not even like feeling all the shame, they just don't know, it's not the right space. Like you said, Thanksgiving dinner, there's laughter, there's chatter, there's music. It's not the right space to go into a deep conversation. So yeah, just preparing yourself, giving yourself all the tools, especially during the holidays. I'm so glad that this episode is coming out this week, because it's like perfect timing.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
holidays are really challenging.
Mm.
I don't want to derail if you wanted to talk about something else, but just in the realm of holidays, like with Christmas too, for people that celebrate Christmas, like a lot of us have this vision of how we celebrated Christmas as children. And when you don't have the children to take to get the pictures with Santa, to write letters to Santa for, Christmas Eve, fill the stocking, leave the cookies at the chimney, like whatever it is, a lot of women feel as though they just want to go hide under a rock around the holidays, because they don't have that ability to recreate that vision for their, future with children. So it's really important to figure out, like, what can you do either as an individual or as a couple. I'm married, so we have like our own traditions that we started to create as a couple, and realizing that you can create a different set of traditions or fun pathways and things for you to do, either as a solo person or as a coupled person, that still make the holidays feel fun and exciting. Because if you're constantly trying to compare your life to the past version of it or how it's always been, then there's never a new room for growth or a new room for excitement. So I really like to talk about that around the holidays as well.
So beautiful. And you and I were chatting about purpose a little bit ago, and you have a very unique take on purpose, and I love it. And, as women, we could all agree that as you were growing up, we start to think that for some of us, maybe we're starting to think that having kids is our only purpose. Not all women think that way, but maybe, use your discretion. For some of us, we felt like that from time to time. So I can imagine someone, who might have a story just like yours, trying for so many years, and then finally just, working, trying to accept it, working through it, and then having to redefine what their life purpose is now, or just kind of really embracing their whole entire life. What's your perspective that you can give women who are trying to navigate that?
Well, I think purpose gets complex. Like you said, many of us have been socialized to believe that there's this order in which our life, goes, and the ultimate is, giving birth to a child and becoming a mother. And when that doesn't happen, it can have you question, like, what is my purpose going to be if I'm not a mom? And I went through that too, where I was kind of like lost. And, I tried becoming a workaholic, and I was like, well, maybe I'll get my purpose from work, or maybe I'll get my purpose from this and that. And I found myself constantly like trying to attach to something to feel as though it was like filling that role of purpose. And it became really exhausting for me. And I felt like, was the thing I was choosing to call my purpose, because that seems like such a important word to put your association with, was it big enough? Was it impressive enough? Would people see it as important enough? So I got to really thinking about purpose being really not something that I declare for myself per se as like a blanket statement, but what is it about who I am as an individual that people find purpose in associating with me? And I think back, the first vision that came to my mind when it came to this sort of figure of purpose was my second grade teacher. She taught me how to do arithmetic. I still remember, like, we'd have to go and do like these charts on the wall, and Mrs. Drennan was her name, and her purpose, like, I remember at, this age in my life, that I associate my purpose of knowing how to do math through her. Yet when she went home, I know she had kids, like, she was a mom. So her purpose at home was maybe something different than it was in the classroom to me. And then it started getting me thinking about the fact that if we just show up being who we are and feeling good about who we like aspire to be every day, and just what naturally feels good to us as we're moving along through our days, we're creating purpose just by being us. And the purpose that I create in the life of my sister is different than somebody who's like a colleague, or with my husband, or with a girlfriend when we hang out. So for me, I found that it took a lot of the stress off of me to have to walk around with this singular purpose that I connected to and identified as being, when motherhood wasn't the option for me.
So powerful. And I feel like women were redefining what it means to be a woman in so many different ways. And especially also in this way. Do you also get people that maybe just choose not to have children? Maybe it may not be an infertility challenge. Do you also get people who just have that choice?
Yeah, I do. There's people who maybe just didn't, have an ideal childhood. And when they think back to their childhood, they're kind of like, you know what, like, I'm good. Like, I'm fine just hanging out and living a life without kids. I think that there's some people who decide that, they haven't found the person that they want to procreate with, and that's their prerogative, and it's a priority for them to just live a life that feels good and fulfilling to them and nourishing to them as an individual. So I think that there are a lot more people who have come forward and spoke about their decision to remain childless by choice. So there's kind of two classifications of people: childless not by choice, which would be somebody like me, somebody who maybe has an autoimmune disease and they can't have children, maybe someone who wanted to be a mom really bad, but they never found a partner that they decided to they wanted to, but they decided, they haven't found that partner, versus someone who's childless by choice could be someone who was like, you know what, I'm good. Like, life's okay. And a lot of that in both buckets, people judge you. Like, people still judge me because I didn't adopt. People will be like, well, there's kids in the world who need a safe home that, you could always adopt. And, that shouldn't be assumed to be an answer. Like, it should be whatever you feel called to and whatever you feel is right for you as a woman in this world. So I love that we are at a time in conversation in society, even though it's not as fully acknowledged as I wish it would be, that people are talking about it more, and it's more readily recognized that motherhood isn't the answer for everyone.
Right, yeah. And I could imagine that also adding a lot of pressure, if someone, and I'm sure they mean well, when they have those comments about how there's so many children to adopt and so many children that need a home, right? They mean well, like they're probably not out to like ruin our day or anyone's day. But it could also, but again, and they may not have like, they're not experiencing this. They don't know all the emotions behind it and just all the things that go into navigating this and redefining life for yourself. And so it's important to really highlight that, maybe for those of us who might have made that comment or we might advocate on behalf of children who need families, just use some discretion. And that also brings me into my next question. For people who are listening to this, men and women, maybe they do have families and kids, maybe they don't, but also as the other person who may not be experiencing this situation firsthand, maybe they have friends or family or coworkers who are in this position. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how they can support people around them?
Yeah, well, I think just asking, somebody, how are you doing? Like, that must have been a really challenging time for you. Or, I just want you to know, like, if you're ever up for talking more about it, I'd love to, just be here to listen. But I think, like you said, even with the "you can always adopt" comment, I know people said it to me from such a loving place because they knew how challenging it was for me to come to a point in this path where I wasn't able to have children. But it also feels very diminishing when you say that to someone, because it, as the person on, my side of the screen, it's like, oh, well, they don't think that I tried hard enough, or that the fact that I left options on the table meant that, my efforts didn't go deep enough. So I think it's just, instead of maybe giving advice, just acknowledging that, hey, I know that's got to be so hard. Like, or I really appreciate that you're choosing to share this with me. And recognizing, that somebody is giving you a glimpse into, a peek behind the curtain of something that's been a really hard path for them. And anytime that you can say or anytime you start a sentence with, well, at least you, I think I'd stop that, because it's usually like, well, at least you didn't, have to go through, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, like, well, at least you don't have kids like mine who are maniacs, or, at least you're not a single mom and don't have to raise kids like I do. Or, people say that stuff, I think, to create acknowledgement and try to relieve, somebody's burden that they're saying that to. But then it comes off to that person on the other side of, like, that you're diminishing them, or maybe not recognizing what they've been through and all the efforts that they've put forth.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking that inadvertently, the person, again, they may not just be knowledgeable of how to interact in the situation, but they're also diminishing the decision. Like, you and your husband made a clear decision, like, if we're not going to have a child biologically, then that's going to be the end of it. Like, and I'm sure there was so much in that conversation, like, you guys being on that same page, and no one needs to know your reasons, and so it's almost like when other people, when we're saying the adoption comment, or at least you, blank, 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 it's like it does kind of undermine the person's decision on how they want to feel empowered in their life going forward. So really good things to think about.
Yeah. And we did. I mean, we looked into adoption. I mean, we considered it. And when push came to shove, we were exploring international adoption, and there was just so many opportunities that I think I was so fearful that I'd have more heartbreak, that something wouldn't work out, or in the last minute, someone would change their mind, and this child that you thought you'd bring home, the birth parent maybe decided that they didn't want to put the child, in the adoption process. And for me, I think I judged myself a lot too. Like if I was stronger, I would have been able to endure that. But I, for a long time, looked at myself as very weak for not being able to move forward with adoption, because I was like, well, you should have just tried, to just be stronger, and you were preserving your emotions for things that you didn't know whether it would happen or not. But after going through the 7-year journey through fertility treatments, I just couldn't imagine being at this crossroads of finding out one more time that my dream of motherhood was going to be taken from me.
Wow, it's deep. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It really does just add so much insight to the whole experience on, like what it's like to navigate all those different aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you brought something up too about like the decision between my husband and I think a lot of couples, when they leave fertility treatments or, move forward without children, they don't know who they are as a couple, because a lot of times, at least I can speak, for myself, that was one of the things that played into my decision to marry the person that I did. I was like, oh, he's going to be a great dad. He's like, loves kids. He does this, comes from a beautiful family who is so loving. And when you realize that it's just going to be the two of you for the rest of your life, there was a point in my marriage where I questioned, like, is this going to be enough? And so it's not just this, not having kids, but it makes you kind of look at the person that you're spending your life with, and how can we continue to nurture this relationship and feel connected on a level that we see ourselves together for the next, say, 40, 50 years of, our lives, however long, even though we don't have the children amongst us to keep us bonded. So there's a lot of that plays into it as well.
What a beautiful journey, though. What a beautiful journey. In a perfect world, what would it look like? You mentioned in the beginning that when you were going, when you were going through this in the beginning, when you decided to stop trying and all the things and going through the treatments, that there just wasn't resources. So in a perfect world, what would it look like to have those resources available for women going through this?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important. And this is, some of the advocacy work that I do, is letting the fertility clinics and the OBGYNs know that women want more resources. So putting together like resource lists, when you're going through treatment, you get a lot of resources of, acupuncture, massage, Reiki, like all these things that are supposed to help you conceive easier. But also in there, let it be a reality and a norm that women might not end up pregnant. Because when you don't see any acknowledgement of that, or there's no educational tools that acknowledge that that motherhood might not end up for you, it makes you feel like you're like the worst case scenario. So for me, it's really trying to get the fertility clinics to have that be a normalized part of the conversation. And I've had some people that I've talked to that are fertility doctors and reproductive endocrinologists. That's, really what a fertility doctor, their formal name is. And they're like, well, we just don't want our patients to feel like we lost hope in them. And I was like, yeah, but think about how much more acceptance they'll feel of themselves if you just let them know that things might end up this way,
Right.
and you may become a mom. The statistics are this, the statistics, are high on this and low on this, but, let's have a conversation and be honest with all the different scenarios that might end up. So a lot of times they just offer patients an opportunity to do like a donor egg or a donor sperm, depending on if the infertility is the female factor or male factor, or they'll, offer you adoptive services, but nothing as far as moving forward without children.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just really trying to create more awareness. So I joined a national organization called the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. It's kind of like the big, like the American Medical Association type organization for reproduction. And I went to their national meeting just last month in Denver. And I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to stay silent anymore. I just, if no one's having this conversation, like, let me be the first one. And I've gotten a fair amount of positive responses, and I'm not going to cower back and be shy anymore to represent a huge population of women who need more from their providers.
Yeah. Cool. So a list of resources is what you're suggesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
And normalizing the conversation.
Normalizing the conversation.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the doctors are like, well, we don't want our patients to lose hope, but it's like, well, it's not that they're losing hope, but like, at what point are you just going to be honest with someone and say, this might happen? Like,
yeah,
cheer for you. Like, we are going to do everything we possibly can. We just need to let you know that there's X amount of percent, of chance, because there's a lot of factors depending on how old you are, what your health history is, so there's not like a blanket percentage, there's a lot that goes into that, but just acknowledging, like, you might leave these treatments, but we're going to do everything that you might leave these treatments without a child, but we are going to do everything we possibly can to get you the child that you're working for. We just want to let you know that we have resources and we're going to support you. Even if you don't end up becoming a mom, we'll help you out too.
Yeah, I think that's huge too. And my audience, we're into spirituality and manifestation and like all the things and creating your own reality. And that's the difference between expectation and intention. It's like when there's so much expectation on something without being aware of the possibility of things playing out a little differently or being open to things happening a little differently, the expectation, it doesn't give the person on the receiving side the opportunity to kind of, like you said, have acceptance for themselves, be more prepared, like all the things. So it's great to normalize that conversation. Let's see, I had another burning question as well. Oh, here's a good one. This just came to mind a couple minutes ago. For other people who are like yourself, who've had journeys and not sure where they might be, maybe they're still new on their journey of coming, accepting it, redefining their lives, planning accordingly after, discovering the infertility or whatever it might be. And if they want to do this type of work, like maybe they want to do what you're doing in a different capacity, what are some options?
Well, I think, for me, the thing that women are looking for most is community. So one of the first things that I started was a meetup group. And I don't know if a lot of your listeners are familiar with Meetup, but it's the free thing that you can start a meetup group. I started a meetup group back in 2022 in Chicago for women who are both child-free and childless, so women without kids. And we have over 600 members, almost 700 members. So it just tells you, like, there's community, women are seeking community. So for me, I always encourage women when they reach out to me being like, oh, I don't know anyone who doesn't have kids. I feel like all my friends, when we get together, they're all talking about mom stuff. And I'm like the only one at the table who has nothing to add. So I challenge them, like, where can you create community for yourself instead of waiting for someone to bring it to you? And maybe that's where the goal-driven part of my, who I am type of person, and the women that I can seem to connect with are very, like, they're self-starters. Like, sometimes you can't wait on the bench for someone to come call you. Like, you've got to be the one to go out there. And I know it's scary and you worry, it's an opportunity for rejection, but either way, you're going to feel rejected, whether you're the one who isn't feeling like you're part of the conversation, or if you put the branch out there and there's no one there to grab it. Right. But I have a feeling that if you're listening to this and you look for community, you'll find it, because I just can't believe that there's almost 700 women in my meetup group.
Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fun. And we just do like random stuff. Like like for Halloween, Halloween when you don't have kids, like there's some women who still like to dress up and, do the costume thing. And so we went to a cute bar I live in Chicago. So, I rented this, a space out for happy hour, and people came dressed in costume. It was so much fun. For the holidays, we do like a holiday gift exchange where everyone brings like a $15 to $20 gift, and you draw a number, and it's not, nothing fancy, but it's just like a really fun opportunity. And it doesn't have to be like something major. It could just be something that easy. And then I've met so many incredibly talented women in the group that they want to start teaching things too. So I have a woman who's an art therapist, and she did an art therapy class for the group last week, and people came and they learned a new skill and had fun, meeting other people. So I'm all about creating community.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. And also, as far as other resources, do you post anything? Do you have anything available if someone is looking for a therapist that would be the right fit for this type of situation?
Well, usually I'll do that if I like talk to someone more one-on-one, because
Sure.
I do
Okay.
have a variety of women who are therapists, women who are coaches, women that I've just kind of come to know and have personally vetted just through my experience. So I could definitely help with that for sure. But I just don't post it
Sure.
as a blanket thing, just because I feel like that it's very unique to each person's
Yeah. And is there a niche? Like if someone is Googling for a therapist in their state, let's just say they're in Florida,
Yeah.
is there a directory that is there a term that therapist would have?
Yeah, there's a woman, she's actually out of the UK. Her name is Stephanie Joy Phillips, and she started something called World Childless Week. And she has a whole list of resources of people around the world. So I would say that's probably more of a pan type of,
Cool. Yeah.
great place to go. So it's like worldchildlessweek.com is her website. And she's got a lot of different resources listed on her website there.
Amazing. Thank you. I think that's going to be helpful for anyone who's looking for that information.
Yeah.
This conversation has been so insightful, so helpful on many different levels. Is there any other tips that you can give us?
Yeah, well, I think it's just really important to recognize that the way that you've always seen life be described or heard of it be described to you, or maybe the people around you have lived their lives, although it may be something that you've always felt connected to, it doesn't have to be the blueprint for your future. And I think it's just really hard for some women to let go of this vision that other people have for their lives. And a lot of us put others' expectations of us before we put our expectations first. So if you feel like you're at this point where you're like, I'm not sure that kids are the right thing for me, or, I don't know that I want to go through fertility treatments. I don't know that I want to, do all these things. Like, listen to yourself, because I think that we have the most beautiful intuition. And oftentimes we put somebody else's opinion and advice before our own.
That's powerful. I love it. Thank you so much. And what's a quick link or quick way on how people can find you?
Yeah, well, on Instagram, I'm at lana.manikowski, and my website, Lana Manikowski. And then I founded something called the Others Day Brunch. So you can find that on my website as well. It's the day before Mother's Day. I bring women together to celebrate themselves and women around them. So the Others Day Brunch is every year, the day before Mother's Day in Chicago.
Beautiful. One last question. Are there any books on this topic that you would recommend?
Funny you ask. My first book is coming out April 1st. Because there's not really a ton of books specifically on this topic. So yeah, my book is called So Now What? just like my podcast, the So Now What podcast. And it talks about creating a life you love without the children you always thought you'd have. So April 1st of 2025, you'll be able to find that on my website.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lana. It's been a pleasure. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a great day.